Every day, we are contributing to the human record as members of organizations and as individuals. Archives, in general, work to preserve the history of a group of people such as cities, states, universities, communities, organizations, etc. The variety of the scope of these records, as well as the ever changing landscape of technology, provide some serious challenges to the field of archiving as a whole. Garner summarizes the Code of Ethics for Archivists from the Society of American Archivists and concludes that the main principles of the archivist are access, confidentiality and privacy, diversity, education and lifelong learning, preservation, professionalism, public good, and social responsibility. Of these values, the most significant challenges will be in stewardship, universal access, and education and lifelong learning. Stewardship, as defined by Gorman, is preserving the value of something and ensuring that future generations enjoy the legacy that comes to them with an equal or enhanced value as a result of that stewardship. Skinner and the Society of American Archivists further elaborate that the preservation of an item is not just to document the past, but more so for the benefit of future generations. One difficulty in stewardship is assessing which articles of information have enduring value and those that do not. Another problem is the formats in which the information must be preserved. Some argue for digitizing everything, while others argue for preserving everything in its original form. Regardless, there are so many forms of information that must be preserved, such as books, printed journals, manuscripts, maps, music scores, films, artifacts, artworks, microfilm, blogs, etc. This task is made even more difficult by fear of accusations of censorship. Therefore, to be successful in stewardship, an archivist or librarian must be knowledgeable not only in a wide variety of formats and technologies, but well informed about the mission of the community or organization that they serve. In Reesneck's view, another key to stewardship in archives is the development of strategic partnerships, which can be helpful not only in the sharing and access of information, but the strategic planning and implementation of strategies and programs that can promote both stewardship and access of information. On the other side of the coin, preserving information means little if it cannot be accessed by those who need it. Sentert declares that archivists have already made millions of primary source documents available on the internet, but this is not nearly enough. The Society of American Archivists states that after archivists determine which information is essential and which is not, they must ensure that it is available for a wide range of peoples and information needs such as students, teachers, researchers, organization leaders, and historians. Many are also in charge of outreach programs to broaden the use of collections and the planning of publication and exhibitions. Also, Garner also highlights the importance of this principle to the Society of American Archives Code of Ethics. Garner also points out that as another principle of archives is privacy, these principles can sometimes be at odds. For instance, it may be difficult to provide access of information while simultaneously protecting the privacy of the donor. Gorman also highlights some difficulties of virtual users to universal access, such as quick and timely responses, answering complex responses remotely, and answering beyond the ability of the individual librarian. However, Gorman goes on to offer some suggestions for how to increase universal access, such as being aware of the strengths and limitations of technology, identifying barriers in order to determine how to overcome them, and working systematically to overcome barriers to equity of access one at a time. Krzyzewski agrees that access services can and should be assimilated across and throughout the organizational structure, and Amayam says that in order to make that information accessible, we must assess and teach the skills necessary to do the work, such as how to use YouTube or Excel or a scanner. Cunningham and Rosenblatt assert that teaching our community members is one of the most important functions of a librarian. However, we can teach information users the skills necessary to perform the task, but more importantly, we can instill and teach a love of learning that will help the individual not just perform the task, but to thrive. Finally, while literacy and learning is not specifically listed as a guiding principle by the Society of American Archivists, it does mention education and lifelong learning. Gorman describes at length how reading is essential to learning and literacy and argues that because of this distinction between the different types of librarians becomes unimportant. The various types of librarians are important for the different stages of an individual's learning and growth. Centric agrees that the availability of online primary resources are essential to the way that students learn in school, but literacy and learning extend well beyond a person's days in school. With that being said, Gorman goes on to describe the importance of the preservation of materials in a variety of different formats, such as words, images, and symbols, whether they be in stone or on a computer screen. Furthermore, and I quote from Gorman, the most important thing we can do is to build and maintain collections of texts in all formats that are as rich and rewarding as possible, considering the mission of the library and the resources available. It is not enough to simply build these collections, but archivists should be actively working to develop both a love of reading and a desire for information in the communities they serve in some very simple ways, such as emails to library and archive patrons, placing the information on the website of the organization, and using social media. Some of my short-term goals are to learn as much as I can about these barriers, the technology available, and the ways that these barriers can be reduced or eliminated so that when I do enter the field, I can make an impact. Some of my long-term goals are to instill a lifelong learning to others, work to develop collections that serve a variety of communities, and to work to bring access of that information to everyone. Continue learning myself so that I can continue to bring down these barriers. In conclusion, stewardship, literacy and learning, and universal access are essential values to the archives and archivists. Information and history must not only be preserved as our link to the past, but it is essential to the future that we are to build. These materials are essential in teaching current and future generations, but the role of the archivist is not just to provide those materials, but to teach a love of reading and learning that will allow each person to thrive. This is important for each and every person, as effort should be made to ensure that these resources for everyone. There will be challenges for each of these principles, but they can be overcome with careful consideration.